Welcome to Stories of Becoming, the podcast where we sit down with people whose journeys of identity, faith, and transformation challenge us and inspire us. I'm Taylor Whitley, and today I'm honored to welcome Reverend Dr. Phillippa Phaneuf. Last month, Phillippa stood before her congregation at North Chile United Methodist Church in Rochester, New York, and shared a deeply personal truth. After decades serving as a pastor, she came out as transgender. In her own words, she said, I'm not pretending. In her own words, she said, I'm not becoming a woman. I'm giving up pretending to be a man. Since sharing her story, Phillippa's words have traveled far beyond her own church, inviting people across the denomination to reflect on welcome, faithfulness, and what it looks like to lead with authenticity. Today, we explore Phillippa's journey from years of faith and service to living and ministering as her authentic self. We'll hear what brought her to this moment, how she hopes her story affects her church and beyond, and what reconciliation and welcome mean in a time of change. Welcome, friends, and welcome, Phillippa. We're so excited that you are here with us today. For folks who might just be meeting you or hearing your story, tell us a little about yourself.
I'm Phillippa Phaneuf, and I'm getting used to that name. It's been a whirlwind of a couple of weeks, really, of coming out to my congregation as transgender. And then somehow that news filtered out to the rest of the world. We get to join with everybody in celebrating this trans joy that's happening.
That's amazing. So let's just talk about what brought you to the moment to come out to your congregation in such a public way. I know we talked earlier this week and you talked about how you had certain things in place because you wanted to take the most care of the people that you shepherd at your church. And so share with us a little bit about how you got to that and what it's been like since.
Right. So 3 months ago, I started hormone replacement therapy. And initially, I thought that it would be about a year before I would be coming out. But it really, as each day progressed and I was getting happier about who I was and who I was becoming, it was such great news that you don't want to hang on to that privately. And you want to share it with the people that you love the most. So it wasn't as nerve-wracking to come out because I've always been surrounded by this congregation that's been so loving and caring and affirming in my life. So I knew that I was surrounded by a bunch of people that have always been rooting for me, and we've been rooting for each other. What brought me to finally deciding to come out was that you get to a certain point where you look at yourself in the mirror and the imposter syndrome finally gets enough of you so that you just get really both exhausted from the disguise of pretending to be a cis white male and also realizing that I had been reaping the benefits and the privileges of being disguised as a cis white male, and thought that the time for that was over. I wanted to be my true authentic self and stand and be counted with my partners who are also transgender.
That's really beautiful. Yeah, I think when you made your announcement, you talked a lot about being less about becoming more this new person, but more about stopping pretending who you feel like you were pretending to be. So how has this shifted your faith, your sense of call, your sense of self? What has that been like?
I think it's a matter of, like I said in that announcement, it's a season of creative transformation for all of us. It's a season of an ever deepening awareness. I've had several opportunities since to remind people that this is the first time I'm transitioning.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is
Yeah. This
the
is new
space.
to everyone right here.
Exactly. This is a space for grace. There's no script for this, but really, really trying to, as I'm being enlightened, of going back in my life and the different experiences, the things along the way that had I known what I now know, I might have seen the signs sooner. Who knows? All I know is that looking back, there's a lot of aha moments. And if I'm in a situation where I'm gaining awareness, self awareness, then it's through compassion and empathy to know that people are also generating some awareness, as well as self awareness as to how they feel about these sorts of things. Yeah.
And I think that's such a parallel to our faith, right? Like the more we learn about, the more intentional we are about trying to figure out who God is and who they call us to be and this story of God and where we fit into it. Your mind just it opens, And so not only do we get to know this deep, vast, cosmic God, we also learn more about who we are
Yes.
and how those things intertwine and how deeply beautiful and created we are is because God has made us that way. And that's
Absolutely.
incredible. And I think one of the coolest parts of your story is your congregation and just how they've
Absolutely.
shepherded, you together without even knowing that they were doing it, right?
Correct.
So, yeah, like talk a little bit about them.
Yeah, we've been together in ministry for 6 years. We're working on our seventh.
Mm,
But from the very moment that I arrived with my 12-year-old daughter, they've embraced us and um, offered uh, healthy, loving kindness. It's just been a real, um, it's just been a real incubator for care and empathy, not just toward me, because I think we've experienced faith communities where it's pastor centric, where the loving kindness and the care and the empathy is shown for the pastor, but no, I think one of the best statistics, the best metric in this is the retention rate between the time of worship and the time of coffee fellowship.
mm,
That so many people stay. So that oftentimes when I'm doing the benediction, I'm saying to everyone, "This is halftime." Uh,
yeah,
that we're moving
yeah,
from we're moving from theory into practice and moving into that time of fellowship where we get to practice loving one another.
that's really cool.
And they already had that before I showed up, but it's really been a pleasure and a delight to be with them and continue to help them develop the awareness of who they are, of what they already embody. It's amazing how creatively transformative that can be.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I think it's such a beautiful picture of what the church can be, right? Like I don't think we could sit here and be like, "Oh, we've been perfect. We never have any disagreements and
Right.
everyone's perfect
Right.
and fine." But the fact that you can sit here, the fact that you felt comfortable to be who you are, first of all, is
Yes.
incredible, right? And I think too it's a two-way street of you set the precedent for them of how to care for people. They also were doing that for you and just this beautiful community that it looks like what the kingdom of God is supposed to look like. And that's really cool. What's been the biggest surprise?
Ooh, I think the biggest surprise is that being aware of my own judgments,
Mm,
being aware of how in my head creating a list of who I would assume would be affirming and who I would assume would not. And I've been so delightfully surprised by by the affirming list is much longer than what I assumed, which was really helpful for me in a self-awareness of saying, look, see, even though I'm the one that's coming out and hoping for affirmation, hoping for acceptance, that there were some spots within my own personality, my own prejudging that I needed to be really careful about and offer some grace and um, some rethinking.
yeah, that's really well put. I think too, walking through just sensitive moments like this, right? Like
Yes.
like moments that need extra care and attention. And I think that so often we do find ourselves in these patterns of like, this person's going to react this way, or this person is probably going to react this way. And to be pleasantly surprised is a blessing, right?
Yes,
And
it
that
is.
is really wonderful. But I also think that it's a good lesson in us being intentional about how we how we're intentional about standing for what we believe in, right? Like if we say, yes, we are for this, then no one has to wonder if we're going to be against it or for
That's
it,
right.
right? And I think that's the beauty of the reconciling movement, right? When we choose as congregations or ministries choose or individuals choose to be affiliated with the Reconciling Ministries, we get to kind of ease the tension or those worries or fears, right? And I think that's really, really beautiful. Can you talk a little bit about you told me the other day the number of people that have reached out to you and said, "Hey, if I lived in right outside of Rochester, I would be coming to your church." What's that been like, and how have you shepherded those people?
Yeah, we've had some people that are in town that have already expressed interest in attending. We've had newcomers already, and the ones that have texted from out of town. What an awesome opportunity to know that there is the Reconciling Ministries Network, that I was able to ask them for a more specific location, was able to go to the website, Reconciling Ministries website, find partner churches that were in their area and point them to, you might want to try out this church. And it was it was so encouraging to be able to give specifics to people, a real practical help to them of being able to almost answer that prayer request right away.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. In your mind, when you were, prepping your sermon, did you have any idea that you would now be a minor Christian celebrity, as they say? Did you have any idea the ripple effect would be this big?
No, no, not at all. And I think that the video really highlights that the authenticity that we could all see after looking at that moment was that presentation, that coming out was tailored for them. I only had them in mind as I was putting that together. In fact, the only reason why I took that snippet out and put it up onto Facebook was to make sure that those who hadn't attended, hadn't watched the live stream, maybe
Mhm.
hadn't seen the email, that they were going to see a different me on the first Sunday of Advent. And I was trying to just reduce the surprise or the shock. So yeah, I had no idea that this was going to take off the way that it did. By taking that snippet out, it takes it out of the context of what was happening during that worship service. So that there's a lot of news sites that have portrayed it as if I did this mid sermon.
Mm.
I was very intentional to actually have this as a completely separate announcement at the end of the service, because it's always been very important to me that when the preaching moment happens, the focus is on the good news, the world changing news of God loving us beyond all measure. And so while that fits personally,
Sure.
I knew that this announcement was going to it was going to have its own moment within the congregation.
Mm.
Doing something like that mid sermon, basically you can count out anybody paying attention to the rest of the service.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that would be the last thing that I would ever want to have happen in a worship service.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. And to so beautifully be able to parallel this announcement with it being good news too.
Right.
This is, and I love how joyful you are. And when we talked the other day, shared that just you're happier than you've been, and you
Yes.
have this joy. And I think that shows. Like, I mean, we have never talked before this week, right? But just this warmth that I feel from you and this sense of identity that I feel
Mhm.
is just so profound. And so how do you feel? Like, I think that's what people want to know. Like, how do you feel?
Yeah, so many people have so caringly and lovingly reached out to ask, how am I doing? How am I doing? And it's so authentic and it's so meaningful. And along with that, to be able to reply, I'm the happiest I've been in decades. Because I think sometimes what happens is that the social media commenting can really give people a sense that but what that it's overwhelmingly negative. But what people don't see are the amount of private messages, and there's so much affirmation that's happening within the threads. And other LGBT news sources that are get the story that this is about creating and fostering safe spaces for people to worship. And I love that they're highlighting that part of the story rather
Right.
than it being about me. I'm overwhelmingly joyful
Mhm.
about all of this. Um, someone asked was yesterday. Someone asked me about how am I dealing with this heavy burden of all of this attention. And I guess that I'm kind of centered in the idea that this isn't personally about me, that this is bigger than myself. This is highlighting something that people are concerned about in our world, that there are people who are marginalized. I'm so blessed that my coming out story is one that has so much affirmation to it. And my heart breaks to know that there are so many people whose coming out story isn't affirming. That my hope is that I can do whatever I can to help communities to reverse that trend so that there are more people that have these joyous coming out stories so that they can look and see that the affirmations far outweigh the tired, old, lazy copy and paste rhetoric that's out there.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, what it looks like for your story to be, the rule and the norm rather than the exception. And I think that's the goal, right? The goal is to create these brave, safe, curious spaces for people to not only feel that they can be their authentic, true selves, but also for people who maybe are on the journey that have questions about what does it mean to be transgender? Because I think it's really important for us to realize that everyone is on a journey, right? We have to be able to, if people are coming with questions and want to truly know, what does it mean to change pronouns? Like, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so to create this space, and how beautiful is it that the church can be the space
Yes,
that helps foster those conversations and
yes,
that growing and learning. I think that's really powerful. And I know we talked the other day about you sharing with your district superintendent. We gave a shout out to your bishop in our conversation with the
yes,
beautiful letter that they put out.
yeah,
And, all of this is possible because the United Methodist Church has shifted, right? Um, the fact that it is national news, that it's not just this pastor in Rochester, it's a United Methodist pastor, that makes me proud to be a United
yeah,
Methodist.
yes.
Talk a little about that and just like the radical hospitality that you have felt within our denomination and what that looks like going forward and how it should motivate us to realize that our work is not really done. We still have stuff to do.
Right, right. Yeah, I would really, really encourage people to read my bishop's statement that he's put forward in regards to this. It speaks for itself. Um, and our social principles now, our book of discipline, how beautiful it is that we can now say they speak for themselves, and we can fully affirm
Mhm.
what's what's written there and to be able to live into it in
Mhm.
this sort of way that we truly are moving from the theoretical, from the hypothetical to the practical. We're really seeing this in ministry, and we're seeing that people who find themselves anywhere on the spectrum of orientation or identity are fruitful in ministry, that are
Mhm.
able to share God's love, that are actually able to be exemplars of God's
Mhm.
love, and how that's reaching people that so often, I think, in our society have been told that they're not welcome,
Yeah.
or even worse, that they're welcome as long as you're open to us changing you, that you are welcome here, period, full stop, that you belong. God loves you exactly the way that you are. And if you never change, God is still going to love you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing to be able to affirm that and know that whatever phone call I would be getting from my district or from my conference would be, Yahoo rather than we have to
We
talk.
need to schedule a meeting for you to come in
Right,
and have
right,
a yeah,
right,
exactly.
right,
That's really, really incredible. You shared the other day too about there had been some I wouldn't necessarily, and maybe I'm wrong, but say worry around, but conversation around if there would be some additional visitors at your church after your announcement for, protesting purposes or for media. And I love what your response was. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think that this needs to be the standard of how
right,
everyone
right.
responds to
And again, this is a shout out to the congregation that is fully on board with these kind of, I put it into the category of nonviolent resistance. This is a real practical way to live out the turn the other cheek sort of maxim. That's what our plan was. And thank God we didn't have anyone show up in protest. Rochester, as a city, overwhelmingly is a very, very supportive, very affirming city. But we were prepared. Our care team had actually gone out and purchased so many donut holes, and so much coffee was prepared. And we had the tables all set so that the moment that we thought that there might be anyone that shows up in our parking lot to protest, that we were going to immediately go out and offer them donuts and coffee to keep them warm. So seeing it almost sacramental to be able to offer the love and the grace of God to those who've come into our welcoming space.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's really, really great. Yeah, I know my church here in Charlotte, we've had some vandalism to our property because of our, pride flags or,
Right,
things like
right,
that. And we've joked often, we just want to make a little sign that says, did you cut our signs down? It's okay. You're still welcome here.
right,
Like how
right,
do
right.
we like come with your questions. We want to walk with you on this journey. And I think that's really beautiful and takes a leap of faith, right? Because even if that had happened, you had been so generous in your hospitality, who knows what kind of people would have responded, like that's the thing, but to know that that is the initial response is just really really cool. I know you have been interviewed by a lot of people. You're on high demand. Is there anything that you wish people would ask you? Or is there any part of your story that you wish would be the focus other than all the things that you've already said, but are there any forgotten parts that you want to be sure that you give a moment to? Because I think that this is important for you to
Right.
be able to really direct the ship of how this
Yeah,
is
sure,
out.
sure. I think overwhelmingly the question helped me understand. And this is like a moment by moment, a daily kind of question is, and not just a question directed at me, but also outwardly for me to continue to be asking the question for those that that are coming at it from their own perspective as to that ground of willingness to understand, a willingness to listen, because I might I might see it or understand it one way one day, and then just in a matter of 24 hours, come to new insights and new understanding that then is um, uh, shareable. Oh, that's a different visual. I never thought of it that way. And to be able to offer out new illustrations for what's happening,
Mm.
and that goes for other people as well, is that after they've taken in and processed, that it's always constantly creating a new orientation.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's
Yeah,
really
so yeah, I think the question, help, it's such a wonderful question. Help me to understand, because it puts us into a state of compassion, empathy, loving kindness, and also vulnerability. It's a great question that basically says, I love you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and it's such a gentle invitation, right?
Hmm.
It's not a well, I don't it's not defensive, right? Like, I think a lot of people enter into these conversations of, for so many different reasons, right? People are scared to ask, they don't want to appear ignorant, they don't want to appear, they don't and a lot of people just
Yes,
don't want to hurt other people's feelings,
yes,
which is
yes,
beautiful. And I think that that question is so approachable, and is so gentle in its approach because it says, "Help me." I'm putting myself in a stature of learning.
right,
"Help me understand where you're coming from," And like you said, it goes both ways. Even if it's something that I'm trying to understand about someone else, I want to enter into that conversation with a spirit of humility and curiosity, and I think that
right.
that's so important as we grow together.
And the contrast between, I want you to understand, versus help me to understand. Um, am I going into this conversation with the intent that that person understands my position?
Mm,
Or am I going in with the mindset that I want to know more about who this person is that I'm sitting in front of?
yeah, that's such a great point.
One of the reasons why I did the announcement the way that I did was to really foster that right from the very beginning. Let's create a foundation here that we're in this together, that that this is, I get to share this with joy. That I'm not defensive about this. I'm not
Mhm,
afraid about this transition. I'm not nervous about this transition. I know this is who I am. So if you know that I'm steady, that I'm centered, I'm grounded in this decision that I've made, that right there allays people's fears, right?
mhm,
As well as saying, now I also care about your joy. And so I'm going to be completely approachable with all of this because this is all new for us. So any question is on the board, with them as a local community of faith, is because we've established that ground of trust over the past several years.
sure.
So yeah, so often I'm finding that people are so wanting to be affirming.
Hmm,
They're so wanting to be helpful, and at the same time completely feel like they're at a loss for not having the tool set to
mhm,
be able to be
yes,
as affirming as they want to be. So they're scared that they're going to make a mistake. They're scared that they're going to say something that could offend. And my heart breaks that they're, and that's, I can totally understand why they feel that way. So but yeah,
sure,
getting the resources to them.
mhm,
So I think one of the reasons why we have congregations that may not have joined the Reconciling Ministries Network is because uh, they've probably been in the state of the hypothetical
mm,
or the theoretical. And
mhm,
then once somebody that they love within the congregation comes out, Then suddenly it's like, we've moved to
Right.
practical. Holy moly, we weren't prepared to be this affirming. We want to be, but oh my gosh. So what happens is that there's so many people that are wanting to take a crash course, how to be an ally
Yeah.
in 20 minutes or less.
Right. Give me the hot topics because I really want to make this right.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
I think that's such a good point of the encouragement of why it's important to, always make sure your space or any place that you're creating, right, is the most accessible and the most outwardly affirming or in whatever the core values of your group are, right, are on display for people because once you've made it the safest or the most accessible that it can be for the most oppressed or marginalized person that would encounter your space, then you've made it better for everyone,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
I think you're so right about that. I think so many people have such good intentions, but they're waiting for, they may not know that there is already someone in their congregation
Right.
that does
Right.
identify
Right.
as someone who, needs this affirmation.
What greater joy is it that we now have nearly 100 people that maybe even previously couldn't say that they had a relationship or knew a transgender person, now is suddenly able to say,
Yes.
I've got a friend who's transgender.
I have a
And it's not as scary as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so often, the joy that comes with, you know, having friends in a community that are diverse and, well, since the words diversity, equity, and inclusion seem to be
Right.
going away, but how beautiful those things are into the community of who
Right.
God has created for us, right? And the goes back to just this deeply understanding who God is when we get
Yes.
to know and experience such different types of people and their
Right.
stories and how exciting it is to know that we're all so different and we all carry such beautiful characteristics of the Holy
Right.
One, right,
That's
into
right.
every space that we enter.
Yes.
And how exciting is that? If we all looked the same and we're all the same, that would be so boring.
Absolutely.
And what a boring cosmic thing that
Right.
we
Right.
you
Exactly.
follow.
Yes.
But the diversity is just so beautiful, and to be able to say, "I have friends who are different than me." That's a gift,
Yes.
and that's really beautiful. I have a friend who, transitioned a few years ago. He shared with me that, in a therapy session with his therapist, when he kind of made the decision, like, "Man, this is who I am, and this is who God's called me to be." He said that he had this image of himself standing for the first time in front of God and being that God had been seeing him for
Yeah.
exactly who he was,
Right.
but he was able to see himself as the way that God had been seeing him and who
Yes.
God created him to be. And I
Yes.
think that once we celebrate that image for every single person,
Right.
that's incredible. Like,
Yes.
that's the goal, right?
Right. To give people the visual, because so often the statement is, "Oh, they're changing into," or the tired rhetoric that I've been seeing is, "You're saying that God made a mistake." And to really lean into that visual is to, no, I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that God made a mistake. What I'm saying is that God and all of heaven is rejoicing that they can actually see that I've finally felt comfortable enough to take off the costume, that I now see myself the way that God has always seen me, and then to be able to live authentically in that I'm already sensing being that much more free to express myself in a pastoral and a ministerial sort of way that so often I second guessed or was constantly dealing with the imposter syndrome as to if they really knew who I was, then I don't think that they would like me. And for so long, I really didn't understand, what do I mean when I say that to myself about the real me? It was always a mystery. And then it's like, once this awareness happens, it's amazing. It's amazing to say that was the imposter. Okay, this is the real me. Yes, absolutely. I can understand why I might have been afraid that people wouldn't accept the real me.
Yeah.
But what a blessing it's been that that all of those ways that I have talked to myself in that way, as that the data proves otherwise, that
Mm.
people have been loving and kind and affirming. Strangers, colleagues that have called, my siblings. It's just been absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think too, it is encouraging parts of your story that, that you do have such a cloud of witnesses around you here and that have been supportive and rallying around you and who I'm sure will continue to remind you of exactly who God has created you to
Right,
be. And
right.
not that you're just included now, but that you're affirmed in that, right? Like that
That,
moving from inclusion to
yes,
affirmation, right?
yes, right.
Not moving from acknowledgement to celebration. For all these things, like there's always a next step, like, yeah, we can
Oh,
do the bare
yes,
minimum, but we can
right.
also go above and beyond. And
That's
that
right.
really a great
Right.
opportunity to extend the love of
Exactly.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing we ask all of our guests is one thing that you are still becoming. And I know that that is
Hmm.
an interesting question, I'm sure, to ponder at the moment. What is something that you are still becoming? Even if it's something like I'm learning to become a better cartoonist because I
Right.
like to draw?
Right, right, right. Well, I'm always learning to become a better parent. I think this has really taught me how fierce an ally your child can be, and I'm so thankful for my daughter in the way that she's embraced this and leaned into it with me and is supportive. I think one of the other areas for me is always wanting to become a beginner. um, the I think for so much of my life, I think there was the movement, the motivation was mobility towards expertise, an expert's mind, knowing it all, versus the idea of actually, and Henry Nouwen does a great job of this, of talking about the blessings of downward mobility. It is employing a beginner's mind. And it goes back to that question of, help me to understand. Is this vulnerability the sense of, look, we all just got to this present moment all at the same time. There's no one of us that's actually an expert in this present moment. We all got here at the same time.
Right.
Um, so to become more of that beginner's mindset of just being open to the wonder, open, curious to, like you were saying about the mind blowing idea of God. And what does that mean when we start uh, to realize that we've just scratched the surface on this? And it's not a pursuit of knowledge, but it's a pursuit of wonder and awe.
Yeah. That's incredible.
And I guess my biggest shout out would be for those United Methodist churches that might be under the understanding that we've arrived,
Mm,
we've done the hard work,
mhm.
we've changed the language, that that we're now completely living into this reality. For those that might say, why do we need a Reconciling Ministries Network to continue? That my deep. I would definitely say that where I'm at, where my congregation is definitely in a situation where we are a living embodiment for why we still, as a denomination, need probably even. I don't know if I would say more now, but differently. Is that this network is now needed, and it's necessary, in new ways for helping to help us live out the reality of all of this.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I would definitely say that it's given me new insights as to, we need resources,
We need,
we need advocacy, we're just starting,
yeah. Well,
and
and it
it's
goes back
but
to what you were saying about, going back to a beginner level. We've gotten this kind of reset button as a denomination, right? We've
right,
we've we've been granted the permission to live
right,
into
right,
what so many people have been
right,
living into in secret for whatever reason.
yes,
Like there's
yes,
so many layers, and
right,
we've been able to reset and obviously bias, but I think too that, Reconciling Ministries, to be able to work with the people that I work with is a gift because they have gone before so many people, so many situations and fought and, just,
and I'm just realizing all of this now.
yeah,
uh
just laid their
you know
heart on the
yes,
line.
yes,
And
yes,
to be able to, what a gift it is for our denomination to have the resources
right,
like Laura Young, like Izzy Alvaran, like Emily Bagwell, and people who were with them before, Ophelia and
right,
Helen, may they rest in peace, and our executive director, Jan. Like, there are so many people who have just worked tirelessly,
yeah,
and the fact that we get to reap the benefits from their
exactly,
hard work is a
yes.
gift. And, well, thank you so much
Well,
for
thank you.
being here and for sharing your story, for your bravery, for your kindness, and just
Like
sharing your joy. I think
likewise.
that your joy, you exude joy. Joy is a word that I would use to describe you, and I'm
Thank you.
just so grateful to be able to know you and to
Likewise.
learn from you and to yeah, be able to share your story in this unique way. Like,
You.
such a gift. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
thank you for all of the work that you've all done to get us to this point where this is the reality.
Thank you for joining us in this episode of Stories of Becoming. I am deeply grateful to Phillippa for her honesty, her courage, and the way she reminds us that living truthfully is a sacred act. Her story is a powerful witness to what can happen when we choose authenticity and trust that God meets us there. Stories of Becoming is a production of Reconciling Ministries Network, and we share these conversations to help build a church where all people are able to live fully into who God has created them to be.